Hello, this is the I'm Not podcast. My name is Jerzy and my guest today is Jose Briones, who is a digital minimalism advocate and a book author and also a YouTuber. And I have actually met Jose for the first time via his YouTube channel. And we're gonna talk about digital minimalism, of course, but also a lot more things.
Thank you for having me here.
So maybe let's start by telling me a little bit about yourself. What are you doing professionally? Why have you started to advocate for digital minimalism and you have started the YouTube channel, etc.?
Yeah, so, about 5-6 years ago now, I started the YouTube channel just talking about digital minimalism and dumbphones. And one of the main reasons was that I was struggling with my own digital time, my own screen time. I work professionally in my everyday job. What I do is I work with nonprofits, so community centers, churches, schools, anything, kind of like in that vein. And I do a lot of trainings and seminars for, something called resource management. And essentially, I got out of university in 2018 and I got my first job in 2019. I had a network of community centers and churches that I was helping. And I was just spending a lot of time online, researching, working, entertainment, all of these different things. And to me, those were kind of like the darkest times because I spent probably somewhere closer to 12 to 13 hours in front of my screen. And
on your phone? Or you are counting also
combined, just all together, all together. My phone one probably was the highest. So, probably somewhere around 9 to 10 hours a day. So, yeah, it was just a lot of time. It was just a lot of time that I was spending on different things. And I decided this is not how I want to live my life. So I started to look for alternatives. And, I came across the light phone. I tried it. I liked it. I stick with it. And since then, I've been making videos and resources and writing about it because I think it's important for people to have their own journey and to choose how they want to use technology.
Do you think that we fell a little bit prey to those companies that made the smartphones and then perfected them? Do you think we were actually manipulated in some ways, or it's just a consequence of good design?
So I think that there is some manipulation for sure happening from big tech companies. But the way to think about it is, and as I have been in this space now for a few years, I've had time to reflect and to think about this, more deeply. And the story goes a little bit like this. When technology first came into the home sometime in the 1980s, it was magical. It felt good. It was like, whoa, this is amazing. This is a new frontier. Let's talk about simple technologies back in the day, but revolutionary at the time. Think about the recording machine, the VCR. Now you didn't have to wait and stay up to watch something. You could record it so that later, during a time that is convenient to you, you are able to watch whatever entertainment you want. Maybe think about the first personal computers. People were able to finally start to compose documents from home and save them and give them to their employer. It gave them freedom. It felt amazing. And, of course, there were introductions to little games, pixelated games at the time, Sega and SNES, and, then it got better with GameCubes or Ataris, just kind of continued evolving. But in the first years of technologies coming into the home, everything felt magical. So as time kind of continued going on, we thought, well, these new technologies, let it be a smartphone, let it be a smartwatch, let it be the newer computers, we assumed that they were going to make our lives better because the first technologies that came into our homes made our lives so much better. They gave us back freedom. They gave us back agency. They gave us access to a world that we didn't have access to before. So in that sense, I think we were trained slowly over time to think more technology means a better life. And then I think sometime around the 2014, that's when things really changed. That's when technologies did not become more useful to us, but they became extractive. So instead of giving us value, instead of giving us a better life, they started to take away from our lives and they started to want more from us. They wanted more attention. They wanted more time in front of the screen because the value is not to give you more time, it's not to give you more agency, but instead, hey, can I keep you watching longer so that my advertiser can make more money from you? And I think that's the disconnect. Sometime in that period of 2010 to 2015, screens got it larger, pocket technologies came with you everywhere you went, and companies realized that our attention was more valuable than giving us convenience or a faster way to do things in the world.
But do you think it was purpose?
Oh yeah, I mean yes, it is on purpose.
Yes.
Yeah, 100%. It's on purpose. You know, it's not a coincidence. No, I think it's on purpose. You know, they saw that they could make more money by keeping you hooked to your screen than by providing great service. So they just hooked you to the screen because it's easier to convince you.
I was asking because a lot of people who work in technology, who are developers, are saying that maybe their stance is that it was not on purpose, but actually it was a normal cycle of improvement of technology. You know, the first iPhone that came, which Steve Jobs in 2007 presented, it was just a mix of a phone and a music player and something else. I don't know. It didn't have a camera even.
Yeah,
and
so
then it evolved.
Yeah, I think during that time period, the early smartphone time period, they were focused on utility. A lot of the companies were focused on utility. And I think the hardware, like if you just put the hardware people, the hardware manufacturers are probably going to make that argument. And I could buy it to a large degree. Hey, we're just adding more features. But the software side, the app makers, that was intentional to capture your attention. I mean, if it wasn't intentional, then Facebook would still show you only your friends' posts. But they don't because that's not valuable to them. If it wasn't intentional, we wouldn't have algorithmic created feeds, but we do. And the reason why we do is because they make more money for companies.
People who don't understand why a simplification of technology use is something valuable would say we should probably make a difference between the hardware, which is the smartphone, and the software. It could be, for example, an iteration of Facebook which has an algorithmic newsfeed. Don't you think it's just a problem of the software, of the incentives that changed in Facebook, in Amazon, in TikTok, maybe?
I think software definitely is a larger problem, but the hardware makes a difference as well. There is an image on the web that essentially says amount of distraction, and then it has a flip phone, a BlackBerry, and then an iPhone, right? And you know, the reality is that when you have a larger screen, you have a more immersive experience, right? Looking at a flip phone and looking at, let's say, a soccer match, right? Like a football match, sports. If you look at it through a very small screen on your flip phone and you have it opened up, it's not a very nice experience. If you look at it on a BlackBerry, you know, the square screen, it's better, but it's not amazing. But if you put it on a large 6-inch device, then all of a sudden, wow, this is nice. And if you put it on a television, it's even nicer, right? So hardware amplifies the software. So it amplifies the good and it amplifies the bad. So yes, software is the larger issue, but hardware also complements this issue. And manufacturers decided to merge both, and think about it from this perspective. If hardware, so let's talk about hardware only. If hardware was the priority, and if these companies were truly saying, I want to give you the best hardware that doesn't distract you, that doesn't take away from your life, then every company would be using e-paper or e-ink for their technologies. They would say, hey, this hardware is the best at giving you the utility that you need without any distraction. But they don't. They don't use e-ink, and it's still very relegated to a niche market, very small market, right? And the reason why is because they're trying to merge full functionality and they're trying to let the software go to the next step.
But in your story was the need to connect more to your life the first thing that happened, or maybe it was the interest in simpler hardware devices, like you mentioned a light phone or a dumb phone in general?
So I think that everyone that starts this journey, in the beginning, you start thinking, I have a problem with my physical phone, right? So the problem is this big phone, right? This is my last iPhone that I purchased, so I sometimes keep it here just for examples. So I thought, at the time, hey, I have a flip phone here. If I switch to a flip phone, right? So if I switch to a flip phone, then my life will be better. It will be fixed. I'm going to be happier, right? So I thought that it was a hardware problem at the time. And that's what I did. I started trying out flip phones. I switched to the light phone too. But quickly I realized that it was not just a hardware problem. It was just not that. I just need to change this device to a flip phone, and that's it. But over time, I recognized that it was a lifestyle problem, right? It was that I enjoyed being on the internet. I enjoyed being connected and getting information and watching the news and watching the podcasts and reading articles and chatting with my friends. So I started to recognize that the problem wasn't necessarily the hardware I had, but it was internal. It's that I did not have better things to do with my time than being on the internet. And the reason why is because of my environment. So when I was in university, I did not spend a lot of time in front of my phone. And the reason why is because I had so many things to do and so many friends to hang out with that I never thought that the internet was giving me a better experience of life. I went to the cafeteria, I talked to my colleagues, I talked to my classmates, I talked to my professors, I went to intellectual lectures and stimulating debates and everything around the college campus, right? Like the university campus. It was exciting. I did sports because, in the university, you play sports with all of your classmates and you have leagues. Yeah. So I had a very full life. But as soon as I left the university setting, what happened was that I didn't have that opportunity anymore. I started to create new habits. And instead of continuing to create those habits, going to intellectual lectures, going to a cafe to talk to people, going to the library, what I did is, this is nice. I'm going to look at it. I'm going to continue and scroll more. I'm going to, enjoy it. And then I enjoyed it more and I enjoyed it more and I enjoyed it more to the point that my lifestyle was becoming internet dependent. So, yes, I switched my device and that helped. It helps. I'm not going to say switching to a flip phone is going to help. but it's not going to fix the whole of it. It's not going to fix the internal struggle. You need to start developing other lifestyle choices to make it better and better for your current situation. What I usually tell people is your environment usually will dictate what your lifestyle is. So the better environment you have, the better your lifestyle is going to be.
Yeah. People sometimes struggle with what should be the first step, because you mentioned the environment and the university, where obviously you had lots of interesting things to do, and so the smartphone was not so appealing. But sometimes people might think that just dumbing down the smartphone would be enough. What is your opinion about just, I don't know, deleting maybe the applications which are problematic for you on your smartphone?
So I think we have to start by saying that everyone is different, right? Every brain is completely different, and what works for me may not work for you. I think it's a good step. However, what we have found with research, with experiences from people that, talk in the internet or give their own stories or share their stories, is that for some reason, and I think it is just that maybe over the last few years, right, over the last 15 years or so, we have become conditioned to expect more from our smartphones. So what happens is usually we will delete the applications and we will say, I'm not going to install them anymore. I'm going to keep them away. And then after time passes, after maybe a few months, 2-3 months, you're like, well, it's not that bad. I'm back to having control over my time, and I don't have this problem anymore. And you start reintroducing the apps, and slowly but surely you will have access to them again, and you will go back to your previous behavior. This is just humanity. It's just like we have to accept that we are like this. So, this happens in other areas. People sometimes say, I'm going to quit coffee. I'm going to quit sugar, right? And it works for a certain period of time. Maybe it's a week or two, or maybe it's a few months, but because they approach it from a detox perspective, right? So I'm going to approach it from a detox perspective. Then once the detox period is over, then they go back to the old behaviors. So yes, it could be helpful. Yes, it works for some people, but does it work long term? Most of the time, it doesn't. Most of the time, it doesn't work long term, because you need to have a lot more interesting things outside of the smartphone, outside of your computer, to keep it away. And usually that doesn't happen as often as we would like.
So you equate dumbing down a smartphone to a detox, to something that is temporary.
Most of the time, that's how it works. In my experience and in the examples that I have seen from people and in the research, what we have seen is most people do it for a period of time. They're like, hey, I'm going to stop doing this. And then slowly they reintroduce it. And that's usually how it works. I think there are more permanent solutions, even on smartphones, but they require that you create an environment for that. So for example, there is a program called Apple Configurator 2, which limits all of the apps that you set it up from the start. And you say, I am going to only allow, let's say, WhatsApp, Spotify, and email, right? So those 3 apps. And the program allows you to only have those apps, and you will not be able to install anything else. So if you set it up like that, you're setting up the environment of the device to not be only a detox, but to be permanent. So, you don't have to fight the willpower battle of like, I have enough willpower today, but I don't have enough willpower tomorrow, right? Because the environment is restricted. So you can dumb it down, but if you dumb it down without these environment constraints, without what it's called a mobile device management solution, you probably will go back to installing the applications again.
But this is something that I have lived actually, because I thought initially that it was just a matter of managing the smartphone I was using, and then of course it didn't work. And I have used the MDM apps, and still I found ways to modify the configs, to install the browser in order to access something. And so for me, the dumb phone was actually a gateway drug to a better lifestyle, because once I have started using a dumb phone, I was unable to do those workarounds in order to still be addicted to applications. For me, it was mainly social media and all kinds of of research I could be doing online actually.
Yeah. I mean, again, the argument is when you cannot do something, you don't have a workaround, right? So for me, for example, I use the Light Phone 3 as my personal device, and this doesn't have a browser, so I cannot browse. This doesn't have social media, so I cannot do social media. And there are other devices like the flip phones, right? So like this doesn't have anything of that, so I literally cannot do it. And that is a better solution than artificially limiting your smartphone.
But life in general in 2026 is very difficult without a smartphone.
I disagree, and I understand. So let me start by saying I understand that life without a smartphone is more inconvenient. Yes, it is more difficult in the sense that some things are going to take longer. Some things are going to be harder. Your employer is going to be more frustrated. Yeah. I get that 100%. And I understand if somebody doesn't want to switch because it makes their life too inconvenient, I want to say, I understand. So let me start from there. The thing that I disagree with is that I disagree that you don't have any agency to change that. I disagree that you don't have the ability to make your work have better policies, that you have more influence than you think you have, and that you can opt out as well. Like you can literally say no to some of these technologies and find ways around it. So I'll put a very extreme example. So for example, I'll go even one level more extreme, right?
Be the most extreme you can.
Yeah. So the most extreme example that I can think of is in China, right? So in China, you have the super apps like WeChat or some of the other ones. They have payments. They have sometimes the key to your home. Without it, you cannot access it, and some of these crazy things that they have the digital ID, so you can argue that you must have a smartphone. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. That probably is true, but does it have to be your primary device? That's my argument to a lot of these people. It's like, probably it doesn't have to be your primary device. Yes, you may need to carry around it with you because of the government realities, but does it have to be the only device that you have and the primary device that you use? No, it doesn't. Same thing in Scandinavia, same thing in Sweden, right? So in Sweden and in Norway, they have this thing called bank ID that you need, quote unquote, you need this to transfer all of these things. Well, lately, I had a friend that went to Norway, he's American, he doesn't have bank ID, he used cash. Are you telling me that physical bank notes, right? Are not available in your country? Yes.
They are, of course.
They are less convenient. I will give you that. But is it the only way, right? So what you have to think about is, does it have to be your primary way of accessing the world? No, it doesn't. You can find halfways. Something that I tell people, I get a few emails here and there from different countries, and they're like, oh, how can I do this? And so, you know what? Maybe what you can do is you can have a flip phone, right? as your primary device, as the device that you make calls and texts with. And then you buy a small tablet, right? You buy a small tablet, and then you bring that tablet for all of the smart things that you need to do. You scan QR codes with the tablet. You do the digital ID or bank ID with the tablet, right? And the more you opt out, so the more you choose to not do these things and find alternatives, the better your lifestyle will be. What happens is that we're used to things being convenient and we don't want them to be less convenient. So we just say, it's too hard. I won't do it. But if you really want to change your lifestyle, you have to be willing to say no. You have to be willing to say to your employer, like the people of France said, they all collectively said, no email after 5 p.m. And they fought for that. Literally, they fought for that and they got it. So yes, it is possible. Is it going to be easy? No. Is it going to be convenient? No. But we have more power than we think we have. And we have to recognize that. So tell your employer, I'm a good employee. Here's my performance. Do not bother me after 6 p.m. I want to spend time with my family. Look, you're concerned that there's going to be an emergency. Okay, let's define what an emergency means. And here is my phone number. You can call me after 6 p.m. if it's a true emergency. But if it's an email that can wait until the next day, I'm just going to do it the next day. So of course, you have to be a good employee, right? Like, you cannot just be a lazy person and demand accommodations. Whenever you are valuable, whenever you are producing good things in the world, people will be willing to accommodate to you because they know that you are able to deliver. And I think that that's what we have to think about in the digital minimalism space. We have to fight harder. We have to advocate for our rights, to not need an app for everything. One last example that I'm going to give is, I go to the restaurant and they only have QR codes. Okay, can you ask the owner, hey, what's the best dish? What's the thing? I don't have a smartphone. Can you accommodate to me?
I'm sure every restaurant has a paper menu also. You just have maybe to ask for it.
That's correct, yeah. But let's say that they don't. They don't have a paper menu. Okay, can you talk to a human so that they can give you a recommendation? And if they refuse, then that tells you that that's not a good place to eat. If they don't care about your money, if they don't care about your interest, then go to another restaurant that wants to accommodate to you. You vote every day with the purchases that you make and the services that you use. And the more you reward these technopoly companies, the worse it's going to get in the addiction space.
This is a very good example with the restaurant, and also the example of France is a good one because it's something that is actually countrywide, so it's just a law.
That's correct. Yes.
And the emergencies can be managed via a normal phone call. Okay, so we have talked about digital minimalism, about dumbphones, and now have you started listening to music from analog sources, or maybe have you started using analog paper notebooks and planners?
Yeah, so I think that once I started to recognize that I don't need the internet for everything, then I started to venture and to do more things offline. I mean, that's just kind of like the reality. So I joined a local cycling club, I actually bought a road bike, for the first time in my life, because these people, right, in my local community, they said, hey, we meet once a month. Are you interested? And at first I was like, well, I don't know. I don't have all of the equipment. But then I said, hey, you know what? I'm going to try it. So then I started to try it. And then, every 2 weeks we go and we cycle the town, right? So we go around and, we have conversations and we have more human time. Then I joined a local kind of like safer streets organization, and I started to meet with them every Friday. Literally every Friday we go, we sit down for coffee, we talk about the needs of our community, and we have that human interaction, and we plan events to make our city safer. And then, yes, there were some other changes, right? So I started to rely less on certain things like digital news, or I started to read less some of these like short form content, right? So instead of reading Twitter, instead of reading, some of these things, I started to read more magazines. I started to read more newspapers. So what I do now is every so often I go to the library and I grab the newspaper and, I read it there. Very few times from time to time, what I do is I buy myself a copy of the newspaper, maybe on a weekend, so I can read it over a long period of time. So yeah, I started to do things more analog. I started to, I've been wanting to buy a record player, right? So, to listen to music and to not have the skip button, like, just skip. I haven't done that because I have a small apartment right now, and it will be too large, but we are hoping to move in the near future. And, once I have a little bit more space, I'll be buying a few extra things. So other things that I just started doing more. I started cooking more from home. I started to learn new recipes. I started to try to make bread, things that before I would have not had time for. And it's not that I didn't have time for it. It's just that I didn't prioritize it. Right. So yeah. I have my setup. My personal setup is the Lightphone 3. And I have a e-ink tablet, and that's how I get most of my kind of like reading books or, that kind of stuff. I buy some books from time to time, but again, I have limited space. So I usually just get them from the library and put them on my e-reader. But yeah, I have tinkered and with more manual projects as well. Over these past 5 years, I have built a few things and contraptions and extra things to, get new skills. So yeah, it's been a good journey to learn other things outside of the technology world.
Do you think that it is a good strategy for somebody who could feel overwhelmed at work, for example, by the amount of tasks or maybe the amount of communication that comes his or her way, to just switch to a dumb phone and switch to planning on paper in order, for example, to be less reachable and therefore have less problems with focus, for example?
Yeah, so I think that a good reset in the beginning is important. So having, having organization, having a calendar, having a task list that you can refer to at a quick glance, it's very, very important. So that way you keep your day organized. So what I started doing in the beginning was I would look at my screen in the morning, right? And then I will write down in a paper and a very small, note card, what I needed to do for the day, what were my tasks, what was my calendar for the day. And then I went about my day. I pick up my phone, I put it in my pocket. And then when I needed to reference, okay, what's my next task? What is my next calendar appointment? I will take out the piece of paper and I will look at it. And then at the end of the day, that's it. And then the next day, same thing. I would log into my computer, look at my task list, write it down, and continue going forward. Over time, I have created a different system, but I think in the beginning is especially important to create that organization, to create that separation so that you learn or relearn how to do it without the need of a smartphone.
You have decided at one point to write a book.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about this book and what was at the beginning your goal? Why you have decided to write a book and how it went?
Yeah. So, after like 2.5, 3 years, roughly 2020. Yes. So after 3 years of doing this, I just had a lot of information, right? I had a lot of information in my mind that I was like, this can be helpful for somebody, right? To have a shorter look. They don't have to go through every video or everything that I have written. Maybe I can put it in a short book that can allow people to understand what a low-tech lifestyle is about and how to think about it, right? So then I started writing. I started to write. What I did was just to keep it simple. I wrote 1,000 words a day. That's it. So
was it difficult?
I think I put a low enough barrier. 1,000 words is not that high for each and every day, but it's short enough that you feel good. And some days I ended up writing more, So I think it was difficult in the beginning days, like, first 10 days, it was difficult just because you're getting used to, putting things on paper, getting everything done. But after day 7, after day 8, you're like, okay, I can do 1,000 words. Okay, let's do it. One day I wrote about 7,000 words, and it wasn't that hard, because it just kept flowing, right? Like, I had that state of flow. I was just writing. It was exciting. But there were days that, I was like, okay, it's only 1,000 words. Like, let me just get through the word count and I'll be okay. So yeah, some days were harder, but I think once you build a habit and the habit is, hey, I'm going to write, then you kind of just get on it. You're like, okay, so just 1,000 words. Let's get to it. 1,000 words, 1,000 words. And it was enjoyable. I enjoyed writing it, after writing it, after now has been published for, a couple of years now, about 2 years. Could I have done better? Probably. Yeah. Like you can always do better. You can always critique your own work. And I think that's a healthy thing. But now I'm actually thinking about the next book, which is, I'm thinking about it from a different perspective. I wanted it to be, so the book that I wrote, my idea was, okay, I've collected all of these little thoughts. Okay, how to pick a dumb phone. Does it work with your lifestyle? I collected some stories from people that made it work for them, and stories of people that had to go back to technology for different reasons, but they did it in a way that now they were conscious why they were doing it. Then I also was able to, kind of like put some other things in the book, for example, like at the beginning, I tell the story of how I got into debt for credit cards, and for me, it was just kind of like, the beginning, it was just like, oh, it's just fun, right? I'm just swiping my card. I'm enjoying life, without thinking about it. But then I started to think, no, this is actually not making my life better. It's actually making my life worse. So I need to do something about it. And I tell other stories, like, for example, the size of something. So the environment that you set up, right? Like, things that I have talked about in the past. And I just wanted to give people kind of like a cohesive story of what has happened in life, struggles that I have had, struggles that other people have had. But my next, if I ever get to publish it, we'll see. But I'm thinking more of a framework, like a complete, because I have been able to think differently now. I think differently on what is necessary, right, to combat some of these things. And I think the first thing that you need to do in order to become more independent of the online world is to fix your finances. I think that that's like a very required step. Without financial independence, it's a little bit more difficult to have offline independence.
This is surprising what you're saying. It was probably, I wouldn't be surprised if you said that the environment you will set up is important, but the finances, why?
So the reason why I think is because you have the ability to choose the environment that you want. So when you are dependent on a specific job to do the things that you want to do in life, you feel like you cannot escape. And whenever you have some degree of financial freedom, you can take a bigger risk. I'll give you an example. So let's say you are a technology, IT, information technology professional, right? So you work with computers, you work fixing computers or providing software support for somebody, right? That's your job. And let's say you make $100,000, good money, great. But let's also say that your expenses are about $90,000 a year, right? So you only have $10,000 to save money, right? That's your wiggle room. It's not that much. So you cannot say, I'm going to switch my career and I'm going to become an artist. And now I'm going to be, kind of like doing, maybe I'll do sculptures, right? So I'm going to switch my career from technology to sculptures, right? But if you have a larger cushion, so if you have a larger degree of financial independence, let's say now you make $100,000, but you only spend $50,000, right? So now you can look and you have a cushion, you have a certain amount of money to take a risk and say, you know what? Next year, or I'm going to save 2 years of my salary, right? And I'm going to give myself 2 years to try out a different life. I'm going to go and become an artist. I'm going to be a sculptor. I'm going to work as a coffee shop person, like whatever it is that you want to do because you're tired of looking at your screen. If you have the financial freedom, if you have the financial cushion to do that, you don't have the constraint. You don't feel trapped. And you say, you know what? Yeah, I can do something else. I can think differently. And then you can start setting up, the environment. I mean, that's actually also very important. But I think the more financial freedom you have, the more you can say no. So for example, let's just give an example into the future. I mean, right now things are happening with digital ID in the UK and even here in the United States, right? So let's say that you work as a IT professional and you have, let's just say that for some reason you're very good at saving money and investing money, and all of a sudden you have $1,000, $500,000, right, in the bank. Wow, you're good, you're great. And your employer comes and tells you, hey, you now need to have financial ID, digital ID, and I need to be able to look into your phone 24/7. You're going to say, no, I'm not going to do that. And because you have money in the bank, because you have made provision, you have a cushion in your life, you're going to say, no, I'm quitting. That's not for me. I don't want you to track every movement that I make. But if you don't have that financial freedom, you're going to feel more trapped. You're going to feel like, okay, I have to stay. It doesn't matter that now they're going to have access to my phone 24/7. Because I need the money, I have to stay in this position. So I think of course, it's not the only reason that can give you offline freedom, but I think it's a very good indicator of, how easy it's going to be for you to say no and to opt out of, some of these societal things.
So you think that this kind of oppression will just become more and more prevalent in this world?
If governments if they continue to go the way that they're going right now, yes, but I hope that we will be able to fight back, and that we will be able to say no and to advocate for laws that are not digital first. And, there are countries that are fighting for that. There are countries that are fighting for less technology dependence. And I hope that more countries will follow in that line of thinking as well.
So we have criticized a lot every smartphone, digital service, every digital appliance. Maybe let's think differently. Do you think that there is some parts of our lives that are better with digital?
Yes, 100%. I mean, we are having this conversation because of digital, right? Like, I mean, you and I are able to have this conversation because of
this is a fair point. Yeah,
because of the digital world, right? I don't think we are anti-technology. I don't think many of the people who are wanting to reclaim some of their time from technology are saying, we don't want any technology. We don't need any technology. I think what we're trying to say is we just don't want technology to be extractive. We just don't want technology to be demanding. We want technology to work and give us more of our lives back. We don't want technology to take away from our life. So again, I'll go back to what I started with, the narrative, right? In the 1980s, when the first home technologies were coming into the household, right? They were amazing. I mean, just think about the microwave, right? Now you don't have to turn on the stove, put the match and the fire, right, and whatnot, and reheat your food with a pan. Now you can just put it in a plate, put it in the machine, 3 minutes or 1 minute or whatever it is, and it's warm. That's amazing. That's great. Technology, amazing, making my life easier, right? We can argue like, oh, if you reheat it in the stove, it's going to taste better than the microwave. Yes, it is true. It's going to taste better. That's fine. That's no problem. But technology made life better. It made life easier, right? Now with the VCR, I can record my show. I don't have to stay up and lose my sleep. Now I can just watch it in the morning. Perfect. Technology is making things better. But now technology is making things harder because it's not focused on making our quality of life better. So yes, technology is amazing. I love technology. But maybe what I'm trying to help people understand is, okay, there's a new technology. It sounds great, but why don't we give it maybe a year? Maybe give it 2 years before you adopt it. We have been seduced by the technocrats that you have to adopt my technology today. If you don't adopt it today, you're going to be left behind, right? That's not true. Yeah. It's just not true.
No, it's a lie.
Think about it from that perspective. Technology is amazing. Technology is great, but just give it some time before you adopt it.
Are you maybe into mechanical or traditional watches?
Traditional watches. I do have one. Yes, I do have a traditional watch. Yes, it is kind of like from my grandpa. I have a old Bulova watch that has been passed down.
Excellent.
Through generations.
If it's from the grandpa, it's excellent because it has a story, obviously.
Yeah. But that's actually a great example, right? We have these smartwatches nowadays, right? They tell the time, but they distract you as well, right? So is it good enough? Is it better than your regular watch? Probably not. So, give it some time. And I like some smartwatches. I think there are some better ones and there are some, other ones that are not that great.
What is the best smartwatch?
Just the ones that can last for a long time without having to charge. That's the first.
The original Pebble.
Yeah, the Pebble. I mean, the Pebble, the new Pebble. The new Pebble is simple. The interface is simple, and it lasts 30 days. I love that. It's like you don't have to charge it every night, and it gives you just basic information. So I think those are the best, quote unquote, smartwatches.
You have said that we are not anti-technology, and I think it's true, and maybe even I would say that people who are really into technology are probably also the most anti-technology in the sense that they know exactly what kinds of problems are attached to smartphones, to social media apps, to relying too much on AI in your work, etc. Is today being a digital minimalist somehow a statement against the last stages of capitalism, or maybe against the attention economy?
So I'll take you back to what I said just a few minutes ago, which is essentially saying I'm look into how this technology develops before I adopt it, right? I'm going to be conscious. I'm going to choose to adopt this technology and to see the effects that it has in the world. So, I mean, I think we're aware. If you are not aware, I invite you to read a few books about the state of the world and the state of current growth. And I think digital minimalism is definitely a way to consume less. It is a way to reject the idea that we always have to grow, that we always have to have the latest and greatest thing. So it is a rejection of mindless consumption. It is a rejection of having to adopt the latest and greatest gadget just because the tech company said so, for sure. Now, is it a rejection of late stage capitalism? Probably not a full rejection, because at the end of the day, digital minimalists, we have technology, right? So we are engaging in a certain sense, in a certain form of capitalism, right? At the end of the day, we're purchasing devices. We are creating new solutions. So to a large degree, it's not a full rejection of late stage capitalism, but it is definitely a beginning to reject and to say, okay, just because it's available, I'm not going to say yes. I'm going to wait. I'm going to think. And if it's actually going to make my life better and the world better, I will adopt it. Otherwise, I'll leave it to people to, continue spending mindlessly their money on some of these things.
Also, it can be a good attitude if you have kids, for example, to show to the young ones the proper attitude towards adopting new technological ideas, and also towards how to use technology in such a way that it's you that control the technology and not the technology that is controlling you.
So I remember when cell phones were starting to become more popular, in the early 2000s. And I remember always asking my mom, hey, can I get the new one? Hey, can I get the new one? And, my parents were good parents, but in this specific instance, they didn't say no to me as often as I think they should have. They were like, oh, well, yeah, it's been 2 years. Let's get you a new one, right? And I'm like, I think they could have taught me that I needed to use it until it didn't work anymore, right? So I think that's a better attitude to have. And I think that actually got me into trouble, personally, financial trouble, which is essentially every new year when the new iPhone came out, I used to buy the latest iPhone. And then when the Samsung came out, I bought the latest Samsung, right? And that's how I got into debt, for a lot of it, because I was used to this idea, new is always better. Instead of saying, no, I can wait. No, this is still useful. This device that I have is still useful and I can keep it for a long time. And I think those are the myths of capitalism, right? Like, it's just like, oh, it's new. It should be better. Go buy it. But then over time, I was just like, no, I don't need it. I need to be content. And I think that's another very important mindset that you need to cultivate as a digital minimalist, is just to be content with what you already have and to be happy with the things that you have instead of seeking happiness from the latest and greatest tech thing that they're going to sell to you.
Is there a lifestyle that is not compatible with digital minimalism?
The only lifestyle that I think is not compatible is people who, for one reason or another, need technology to survive. And these I think of like medical reasons, right? So like, for example, there are people who are visually impaired. They need us. They need a smartphone to be able to navigate the world most of the time, and by need, I say like, well, they don't need it 100%, but it's more like this technology is making their lives infinitely better. Right. So like, for example, I have a few friends who are visually impaired, and they are either half blind or completely blind. And their smartphone now allows them a degree of freedom that they didn't have before. So they are using technology, but they're using it to improve their lives. So they need to adopt new technologies because it's making their lives even better. So they have a lot of gadgets, for different reasons. Maybe it is a gadget for the kitchen to help them identify the utensils and allow them to cook. But I mean, these are, again, not super common cases, right? Or I think of people who have maybe a terminal illness. They cannot speak, so they need a tablet to speak with. And these are very good things for society. Technology is making the lives of those people a lot better. So those are, quote unquote, not compatible with digital minimalism, because instead of reducing the amount of technology, you are increasing the amount of technology. Besides those examples, or maybe people who need an application for monitoring their, I don't know, lifestyle or whatever it is, I think that everybody can say maybe less technology in my life is a good thing.
What is the best dumb phone?
Oh, that's a hard one. Gosh. In my opinion, the best dumb phone is the one that you stick with. So
it's a nice answer. Yeah.
I think a lot of people want to find what's the best one for this or that. The best one is the one that matches your lifestyle. So it can start from a dumbed down smartphone to a Light Phone 3 to a Sunbeam F1 to a Xiaomi F21. Just use something that makes your life better. I feel like that's my overall answer, right? Now, if I had to pick one dumb phone right now, I'll probably pick a simple flip phone. And the reason why is because it's economical, it's basic, it has no distractions, and it's made for simplicity. So just pick a flip phone, in your country that works for whatever, things that you want it to do. And that's probably going to be better than buying a fancy one, or, like buying the latest e-ink or whatever it is. Just get a simple flip phone. It will do the job. It will be cheap. And if it breaks, it's replaceable, so it's easy to replace. So I think that's the best for me. Of course, the best one is the one that you stick out with, that you use, that complements your lifestyle. But if you have to pick something today without a lot of information, just go get a simple flip phone from the store. It's going to be inexpensive. It's going to be useful. It's going to be simple. And it's not going to demand as much of your attention as a smartphone would.
Thank you very much, Jose.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Could you tell me and our listeners, what are your plans for the next 3 months?
Oh, yeah, for sure. So, it's the end of the year. Now we are recording this, and most of my plans is to spend time with family. So, I'll be traveling. I'm actually very soon, probably by the beginning of next month, this is maybe something that would have not been the case had I not changed a lot of my lifestyle things. But instead of traveling by plane to go see my parents, I'm going to take a train trip. Here in America, trains are a little bit slower than in Europe. So it's going to take me 2 days to get to my parents instead of 4 hours via plane. And I think the reason why I'm doing it is because I want to have more experiences in life and to enjoy the slowness of life instead of just getting fast everywhere. So I'm going to start taking the train a lot more, hopefully in this next 3 months for work or for different appointments that I have, because I want my life to just be a little bit slower than just having the latest and greatest and fastest thing.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.